Hello everyone, my name is JCZN Tech with the Copley Consulting Group, and today I'm going to show you how we're using Qlik Sense to provide government agencies with insight to the coronavirus, also known as COVID-19, as how we tracked this virus from both globally to now in our backyard on the state and local level here in the United States. So you can see this dashboard we've built here on our home page. We have confirmed cases, deaths, recovered, states selected. All these KPIs will change here as I navigate through the application. Everything in here as I click around will be completely dynamic. So because China is such a large skew on the data, we made this button here to exclude China, and I want to focus on everything outside of it. Knowing that we're in the United States, I want to come into our backyard here. And knowing that Copley, we are based out of Boston, Massachusetts, we want to start to look at that area. Before I make that selection, I want to point out we chose to focus on Massachusetts for this area in response to the Biogen conference. Seeing this as a type of patient zero, ground zero for this virus to enter the United States, that was really our focus here for COVID-19. So we go ahead and make this selection for Massachusetts, and we're now looking at the Massachusetts KPI with response to how many cases we have here, but also how many schools and every single school mapped out here in the entire state. And as I hover over every school, you can see the tooltip populate along with its school type, status, the number of students that attend that school, and the contact information of the principal. Keeping this in mind, this is how agencies are using information to drive decisions about school closures. What schools should be closed first? When should we start to reopen these schools? As we start to see less and less cases in these counties and cities and towns, we can start to make more educated decisions and have a wider breadth here to this exposure. Stepping forward in the analysis, you can see how we started to bring in some more information. This is actually air quality data from New York and Massachusetts over time. So daily aggregations of the particulate matter concentration measured in micrograms, and also the air quality indexes that we're looking at. So we can see some counties of concern here and things like that. So knowing that Massachusetts is our area of focus here for today, and knowing that we want to focus on maybe the quarantine period that recently began around March 10th, we can start to narrow into this time frame and start to see this slope here gradually over the last couple of days. We have seen a drop in particulate matter. So not only is PM 2.5 a measure of health standards due to the size of particulate matter that can get stuck in your lungs, but it is also a good measure of pollution that's emitted by our transportation industries and other industrialization that goes on in the area, basically just pollutants in our airspace that'd be surrounded by the public or these testing stations. This is comparative analysis of countries, and at this point we're starting to get into the level of tracking state to state. So everyone's talking right now about flattening this curve. We can look at the curve of countries like China, where pretty significant size population and cases, but we also have a significant curtail here in the number of new cases daily. They've actually really been successful at thinning this out, and they've had a very high recovery rate doing it. When we start to look at some of their neighbors like South Korea, we can see this curve was really delayed, and they followed some of the same practices with social distancing and efforts to flatten that curve. When we compare other countries to China, like Italy, we start to see a much different curve. We do see a couple week delay, but we also see a steep curve that has not yet responded. Knowing that this virus, COVID-19, has about a 2 to 3 week delay from the time someone actually contracts the virus, becomes contagious, gets sick enough to go to the hospital, get tested, and then those tests are available as viable data, has about a 2 to 3 week delay time. So in the next coming weeks, we should see Italy start to tail this out. But for now, we're starting to see very different approaches to how countries have handled their population and how they've attempted to flatten this curve. Aside from just comparing countries, we can also compare states here in the United States. So if we select the US on both top and bottom, we're now looking at the US as a whole. If we want to drill in and just select New York, we can see the curve here of New York, but on the bottom we can select California and make this comparison. And while these curves are very similar at this point in time, it is still very early on. Once we start getting to a point in here in a few weeks where things do start to flatten out over time or get worse, we should start to notice areas of concern and how they reacted to the COVID-19 as a response. So the last thing that we're bringing into this data set is stock market data from the Dow Jones and from the volatility index. So what you'll see across the top here are these green and red bars. This is essentially the variance between the open and close of the Dow Jones day over day, just showing that as time goes on, we got very steep, rapid changes within this index. As we show on the bottom here, we can see the volatility index as the blue line over time, and it's also overlaid on top of the cases of coronavirus globally. Now, while these are on different scales here, we are seeing the same trend. We're seeing them both happen at the same time, and we're seeing them happen at the same rate. Having multiple measures on these charts, we can actually just select this and we can see the Dow index right here mapped over top. And again, we see this start to have negative correlation right here between the Dow Jones and the total cases globally as they kind of cross paths right here of their two slopes. That is all I have for you today, and please stay tuned. Please follow our LinkedIn page. We're going to be sharing a lot more videos and content as we add more things to this application and as we start working with more agencies and getting more use cases. And as always, thanks for your time.